Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29th, 2023 revised order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 38, Section 18, meetings of the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted both in person and remote through March 31st, 2025. Agenda items listed are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB, the school committee recorder, the Berkshire Edge, and Berkshire Eagle. First thing on the agenda is minutes of April 11th and September 12th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second.
You need to approve them.
Yes.
Second.
So I have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Can just.
Yep.
Generally, can we brainstorm a better solution to a note taker than Putnam?
If we could find one, if we could hire someone, we can. If you'd like to volunteer, we can.
No, I'm done with my volunteering. But I mean, have we actively tried to do anything, or can we, or?
We have, and we've been unsuccessful. Our former recorder stepped away or retired. We thought we could do it simply electronically. The technology is not quite good enough we went back one of them and went through a verbatim transcript, and the language is almost perfect, but identifying the different people is quite time consuming. So we will we'll re-advertise it for the moment. Rob doing it is a stopgap measure, and he actually has like a template and shakes things off, and it's pretty efficient and does it in real time. But we very much like to get somebody to do it again.
Yeah, it's real important we do. You're not wrong, Corey, but finding someone, we're not as exciting as we think we are.
But given that the meetings are recorded visually and audio orally, do we need verbatim?
They don't need to be verbatim, but we do need minutes. We go back to them more than one would expect. Even like recently, we had the thing about the unified basketball program, and that was only 4 or 5 months ago. And Stephen, I couldn't remember, and we discovered what we did by going back to the minutes. They're quite valuable.
Moving forward, it'd be helpful when someone makes a motion, if they can just state their name, and when seconded, state their name, I can record the rest. The reason being is that the audio, it's impossible to tell who's actually made a motion.
Yeah, I try to say it, but I don't always do it.
Yeah, but anyhow, I recorded so far the motion as Jason making the motion and Bill. Did you second it? Oh,
I did.
One of the bills.
Two bills.
That's who Ron is.
And Bill just did.
I'll just divvy them up evenly between you.
Bill, just the open meeting law says someone should be able to look at our minutes and get a flavor of what was discussed at the meeting. They don't have to be verbatim.
Okay.
The other thing, like the technology is evolving and it learns. So if you say once what your name is, then it remembers who you are for most of, if not all of the meeting, right? So if we try to do that, that would be good.
So a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstention? Unanimous. Superintendent's report.
Okay, I'm going to start, but actually, Mirabelle, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to invite you to come up and sit next to me. Mirabelle Myers is a high school student, and she's one of 2 student reps from the high school. So get settled, and we'll come back to you when we get to the high school. No, thanks for being here, and I've got a busy schedule. So we'll start with the elementary school and work our way up, and just principals be ready to come up here so you're well recorded, and then a little bit later, Rachel's gonna say something and she could come up as well.
And Maribel, you should know, because maybe Christopher doesn't know, if you have to leave like halfway through, you have homework, you have other things to do, we get it.
Sure, well, I'll probably be out of here around 6:30, 6:45.
That's fine,
Great.
I'm super stoked to be here.
yeah, we're glad you're here.
Good evening, I'm Cynthia Carey, principal of Muddy Brook Elementary, happy to be here. My roses and thorns, we do have a new play structure, thanks to some of the folks on the school committee, and called Nature's Playground, the other side of our front soccer field, which is exciting. We have had parent volunteers in our building, which is the first time in a really long time. Parent volunteers have come in to do recess and lunch duty. We have students now doing our morning announcements. People were dissatisfied with my ability to do morning announcements on time. So they requested that I come up with another solution. And the solution is that the 4th grade students will be doing our morning announcements. They go to the library and Dan Weston helps them. He has a script that they practice before they get on, and they say the date and the lunch, the Pledge of Allegiance, and now they're up to saying a joke, which I also used to do, and many students love the joke, so they have followed suit, which is super fun. There was an art studio led by Allie B yesterday for staff. So we typically have our staff meetings on Wednesdays, every other Wednesday. So Allie Boudreau is offering a art studio for staff to come in and explore and do art, which I thought was super wonderful. And some other very good news is that I hired an administrative assistant for the front office. Which is super exciting. He is a young gentleman named Jacob May. And he is the roommate of the new math teacher at the high school. So it's really wonderful to have him.
Does he want to do minutes?
Right. That's a great idea. I will ask him. Yeah, because I'm like, what do you do in this field at night? He's like, nothing. So maybe you can come here. Yeah, great idea.
We're excited.
Good. And my only thorn is that I still am understaffed for paraprofessionals, and it impacts my recess and my lunch and the, quality of the work that teachers can do with students in small groups. That's it.
No.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Jake.
Good evening, everybody. And we have Fred here too to present the teacher ones, or would you like me to do both? I don't know.
Yeah, present,
Okay.
whatever you're comfortable with.
So, yeah, that'd be great. Rosa's like to thank our multilingual family advisory council, the CAPE, for inviting all 3 of us principals to meet with them last week. We spent a couple of hours together, and it was a really a warm and welcoming and informative couple of hours for us, and so we're really grateful to them. Thanks to our students for their advocacy for clubs and activities and affinity groups and other means of using their ideas and their voices to increase belonging and to create community. At Du Bois, we're really proud of them. We've got some new things starting up that we're really excited about. We had a wonderful Meet the Teams night last Tuesday. It was really well attended. Our opening session in the cafeteria was honestly standing room only, wall to wall. And that was a wonderful challenge to have, hoping the fire marshal did not drop by as we were doing a back to school night. Lots of good feedback from our families and from our team at Du Bois. And our instructional leadership team and our social and emotional leadership team really helped organize that and plan that and set the menu for the evening, and really grateful to them as always. Also like to thank our ILT, our instructional leadership team. They helped us plan and deliver our first half-day PD earlier in the month. It was a really useful, powerful, and I think respectful of the professionals that we have in our building use of the time. We talked about howls and how to use proficiencies and how to do proficiency-based reporting. And again, really good feedback from folks. We're very grateful to the coaches, the athletes, the parents, and the helpers of all kinds who comprise our district's unified basketball team. This is really Christopher's team. Christopher, I apologize if I'm stealing any thunder.
It's not my team, it's our team.
It's not.
It is our team. You feel all of that when you go to the game.
Yeah, it's, if you've never been to a unified basketball game, really encourage you to go. It is like, it's about as close to magic as we get. First game is on Thursday, October 3rd. It's at 4:30 in the Pittsfield High School gym. If you want to get out your passports and come up to Central County. If you are more comfortable being at home or that's more convenient for you, October 8th, which is a Tuesday, is our first game, and that's in the Monument Mountain Gym, and that also is at 4:30. But we're really grateful to all involved in that. And then on October 18th, and we would welcome a visit from any of you that day, we will be welcoming author Alexandra Diaz to Du Bois. She is the author of our One School, One Story book, Santiago's Road Home. She will be spending the whole day with us and working grade level by grade level, doing various writing projects and self-exploratory projects with our students, and it's really going to be a great day, and we're very excited about it. In terms of thorns, we're struggling with some inappropriate use of language at Du Bois. I can't fathom we're the one middle school in America that is having that struggle. Ellie Rizzo and I are going to be visiting every crew next week to discuss this inappropriate language. We're really focusing on, we're not talking about experimenting with swearing or using spicy or salty language. We're talking about language that is dismissive or disrespectful of who and what a person is, and or a group that person happens to associate with or belong to, and we're just not going to have it. And so we've been dealing with individual students, we've been working with several families, and we're just gonna go around and reiterate our expectations, crew by crew, grade level by grade level, and talk to our students about the power that their language has. And we're going to use this also to build a little anticipation for our work that we hope is upcoming with the Department of Justice Spirit program that will help empower some of our students to move past being bystanders and really allow them and encourage them and give them the toolkit to step in and be advocates for the really decent treatment of one another. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody, thanks for having me again. Tonight I'm here to give you some news from grade 7 and 8 about our roses and thorns. I'm glad that Dick just talked about the appropriate language. That's one of the things that our team is really excited about. We're really appreciating how we're approaching language. It's inspiring the teachers to be more forthright with the students, immediately catching things and addressing those in our classroom, but we just also appreciate that it feels like a school, a unified approach, as opposed to each of us trying to make this battle happen. We're all doing it together, and that's really great. We're also excited as a team about the howls, the habits of work and learning. We really feel like it's narrowed down, it's concrete, it's things that kids can grasp. It's not just like a theory that teachers like to bandy about. So we really feel we're going to get some real response from the students in a way that will help them be better students, will make them also able to gauge their own progress. And we can give them really concrete ways that they can improve their studentness so that hopefully all of their schooling goes a little bit better. Team 7 also says, hey, we're really excited this year because we seem to have a lot of roses. We're really excited about working with each other again, and the kids are bringing a lot into that. They seem to have an awful lot of student skills. And we hear a lot about COVID and things that kids lost because of COVID, but we have a group of students this year who really seem to be taking care of business in ways that are appropriate, that we would sort of aim for by the end of the year. But kids are absent and they're already advocating by email, like, hey, I'm out, can you give me any work? They come back and they're following up as best they can. We wish that was everyone, but it's certainly a lot, and we're appreciating the students who are making that effort. Thorns, it's still early in the year, and there's all kinds of things that we're excited about as faculty, and we're still building our stamina. You take that little rest over the summer, kind of rebuild, and then you forget, like, you gotta run every day, and it takes a while to get your stamina back. But we're excited about rebuilding ourselves to be there for the students. Speaking of rebuilding, Team 8 is really excited about working together this year to build back from where they were last year. They were the team most impacted by the unfortunate events that happened. Rebuilding takes some time, but they're moving forward and they're excited to work with one another. Stephen, our math teacher, is now there for the first full year, and in the middle of last year, and we have Amy as our new English teacher, and she's doing fantastic work and working well with the group. They're starting to see some success with new organization systems that they're developing for the students, and they're excited to see how they can generalize that and to see what works for everyone, but they're making some progress there. Thorns, the 8th grade group of students is requiring a lot of culture building. Unfortunately, the 7th grade didn't quite make enough progress with them last year, so that culture could continue over, but we appreciate that they're continuing that work. And like us, they are also trying to build their teacher stamina. We really feel positive about this year, the upstairs floors, and we're really looking forward to doing the best for students. And things just feel really different this year in a very positive way. And that reflects back, I still hear comments on a regular basis about how school committee members were at our breakfast. We appreciate the attention you're paying to us. Thank you.
So sitting next to me is Maribel Meyer. She's a rock star, and I'm super psyched. To use to steal your own words, I'm stoked you're here. So thanks for being here. Tell us some of what's going on at the high school.
So we had a lot of good things. We had our club fair last week during lunches, which gave students, especially incoming freshmen, a great opportunity to kind of get a feel for some things that they can get involved in early in the school year, some communities they can find, and maybe some new interest for things they didn't know were happening. Included in that is Fall Fest, which, if for those of you who aren't familiar with Fall Fest, it's a great program that's run through the high school with Shakespeare Company. Up in Lenox, they send teams of 2 directors to a series of schools around Berkshire County and upstate New York, and each school puts on their own production, and then all the productions come together at the end for a great 4-day festival. So auditions for that one this week. People seem super happy and excited to be part of this great production, and you're going to see a lot of students working really hard on that, which is great. We had another SOB meeting, like our first official SOB meeting last Wednesday. So the one before that was our recruitment meeting, and this one we had a lot of returning faces coming back, which is great. A lot of underclassmen that are starting the work, which is really great to see. And we were able to have all the committees start planning some short and long-term goals to do really productive work this year, which is super exciting. Restorative justice is back on track. For those of you who aren't familiar with the restorative justice program at the high school, it's a really great effective form of, I'm not going to call it discipline, but effective collaboration to work with problems. So the group is able to meet again and kind of start planning for the year, which was great. There we go. Our sports teams are killing it. Our football team beat East Hampton in an upset, which was 44-14, which was massive. Ariel, who's the other student around with us because he's on the football team, after losing the season opener and coming back the previous year against the Eagles, the Spartans came back with a bar that was represented by the score. They now look ahead to play Kuzik, which is one of the best teams in the division. Oh, and I lied, it was 48-20 actually, not 44. In our girls soccer beat St. Mary's. It was unclear if it was 9-1 or 8-1. Either way, it was a great win. Lots of goals and assists by great, fast riding players, which was great to see. In terms of thorns, our phone policy is going well in terms of phones. There have been a lot of complaints and issues with the earbud section of the phone policy. We've had a lot of, or I personally heard a lot of students complaining we're only allowed to use school issued earbuds, and I think that's causing more issues than the phones. So that's been a little bit of a stuck point that we've seen in a lot of situations. And additionally, we're having an issue with keeping our school parking lot clean. There's been a lot of trash. I had to put it over the announcements the other day. People aren't cleaning up after themselves and keeping it a safe space. So that's something we're trying to work on right now.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Kurt, Christopher, anything to add?
I have a couple things, but you know, like we did on the opening breakfast day when I had to follow Jake, now I have to follow Mirabelle. You know, it might be a little bit of a letdown, but I would like to add a couple things. Appreciate it. I just, I wanted to echo something that Jake McCandless said about the LPAC meeting on the 19th that we were at. It was fantastic. It was full house down there at the CSO, right? Community Service Functions?
Yeah.
We, you know, we were all able to speak, meet folks, and really show our desired support and do whatever we can to help these families. We continue to work on rigor at our September 18th PD Day. We started by, you know, really developing a common understanding through Karen Hess's work on cognitive rigor, and we used her matrices to review our own assessments and where we feel like they align, or what part of the matrices they align with. We're going to continue that work at our faculty meeting on October 2nd, and then again, moving forward on our half-day PD on October 23rd. I think it went really well. Everyone was very receptive, worked hard, and we had some great conversations. On Tuesday, just past this Tuesday, the 24th, we had our open house back to school night, which was also preceded by a welcome and introduction for our Spanish-speaking parents and families. This was led by some select staff members, some of who were at the meeting the week prior. Overall, the night was well attended. I think the parents were appreciative of the event. I thought there was a lot of energy in the building as parents went from classroom to classroom, following their kids' schedules, and in some cases, understanding a little better what goes on. So I didn't have to take any parent photos, so that was good, and I think it was acceptable.
Great, thank you.
A quick question on the
Yeah.
rigor.
Yes.
Have you built in ways that you're gonna measure kind of the impact of the work that you're doing is having?
It's a great question. No, we haven't yet. Right now, what we were really focused on is really understanding what we're asking for in an assessment. And we have this assessment, what are we measuring? What levels of depth of knowledge are we measuring? Are we making sure that we're targeting exactly what we want to target, right? And then if the kids can meet those targets, then we have an understanding of where they're at, right? And if they're not meeting that, then we also have some work to do. But it's not just simply a matter of, let's put everything at depth of knowledge 3 and 4. You know, there's also use of place in assessments for depth of knowledge 1 and 2, you know. So, no, but I think that's going to come naturally through the work. Other questions?
And what are the school earbuds and those language classes? What are students?
Maribel might be able to answer that better than I can. I mean, I understand it. But I don't know, I'll have to talk to the other administrators and see, you know, if there's anything we can do about that. But go ahead, please.
So a lot of it is like kids will go into study hall and they'll wanna watch a video their teacher assigned or explaining an assignment or something like that, or even just plug in music because the study hall is super loud, or they're trying to do an assignment in class and they'll have like earbuds they can hook up to their laptop, which is school permitted, but then the earbuds aren't permitted, and it's become a bit of a hassle for some students. I've heard a lot of negative feedback on that.
If they have their earbuds, they could be listening to their phone.
I think that's the logic behind it. Yeah, that's what it is.
Definitely the logic. You said music, you know, so maybe, I don't know, can the kids access Spotify or whatever on their Chromebooks?
Maybe, I don't know.
So, you know, like, so that's the logic
Exactly.
behind it, for sure, you know, and it's also a slippery slope. Happy to talk to you about it. And we see them a lot in the hallways. It's probably mostly where we confiscated from.
Yeah,
So, but the kids are with it.
I would say overall, it's a huge improvement in like just the dynamics of classrooms and everything. So.
Good, well, and honestly, you know, I'll talk to Mr. Brown and Mr. Ruggiero about that and just be happy to report that to you.
Yeah, for sure.
But it does make sense. They can't have their own earbuds. 'Cause
Yeah.
You have no idea what you're listening.
Yeah. This is where most of the negative feedback is coming from, so I'm gonna just put it on there.
And I guess there's, you know, for me, without really knowing the intricacies of what can be done on a Chromebook, can you access Spotify? I don't know. And if you can or cannot, well, it's just would be easier to make the connection that if they have their own buds and perhaps their own device, and maybe they're doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Rather than if they have, you know, a device that has to be hardwired, as it were. So, but that is the.
Has the Chromebook rollout gone smoothly?
Yeah, it really has. In fact, it was almost like completely uneventful. In other words, no problems, nothing. Just a few bumps in the road. Been connecting with Rob on that, and just somebody broke screen or whatever. So, small. Yeah. But I haven't heard anything. It's been very quiet. Have you noticed anything? Any problems around that?
No.
Good. That's my very smooth. Good. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Steve, if it's okay with you, I'd like to not jump into the MCAS AP report right away and run through some of these updates and requests for approvals, and then we'll do the MCAS all at once. There was a question, and I sort of misunderstood it, and put an update on it, but the update is actually for something else. So I thought a question was asked about the instructional leads, and ended up the question was about the role of the instructional coach. So I'm just going to come back to a future meeting with that.
That's fine.
At a previous meeting, Fred had mentioned some things about mandatory training, and many of us assumed it was the mandatory sort of special ed, civil rights, and other training, but it was actually the ethics training offered by the state. So it's not something that we control. It's a state process that all state employees and elected officials use. And there's a known issue with some types of laptops using their system. And there's a known workaround for people that are using that. So we'll share that widely. So there was that. The last one, I'm just gonna have Sharon run through. We have some co-curricular guidelines that the school committee worked on and then revised. They're important for a whole host of reasons, but a lot of it deals with money and how money moves around. So I just asked Sharon to give a quick update on it and remind people about them. And then it's my understanding that in each of the schools, this material and information is shared at the beginning of each respective season, or in the case of something that's non-athletic, in advance of musical at the middle school.
We have two documents. One is the co-curricular guidelines we'll talk about tonight, and the other one is the student activity guidelines. The co-curricular guidelines was developed specifically to help booster clubs, PTAs, and other parent support groups to understand what they would be allowed to pay for and what the district pays for, how to set up accounts. That they can't use the district tax ID, that they need to set up their own, what can be funded, how it can be funded, if they want to have additional coaches. So it's all those guidelines that outside organizations needed. And so what we're trying to get back to, which we had for a few years, was a large meeting at the beginning of the year, particularly at the high school, because of more booster clubs there, more activities there, where we go and go over the guidelines. It also has required documentation that they should be presenting to the district each year, just to make sure that, everything's in line and that they're spending what they should be, and to see if there are any issues that the district should be addressing where there are great needs that come up every year that the booster clubs are covering that the district may want to talk about. So these are available. We are going to have them online. So if people want to see them online, we'll have them online as well. Questions? Yeah.
What's being done differently? We've had them, they've been updated, and it seems to be more of a compliance issue.
Right.
So I guess what's being done differently now to ensure that it's actually following?
Christopher and I are working together on the co-curriculars and as well as the student activity to implement, to make sure that they are implemented with, what's our word?
Fidelity.
With fidelity.
And rigor.
So So that's what's happening, Corey, is we're working together to bring Christopher up to speed, so then he can bring his staff up to speed on the guidelines.
Corey, you're absolutely right. The only way these are going to work effectively is if they're explained to the booster club parents who are busy people. They do booster club, they have kids in high school, obviously, they probably have jobs. If we just say to them, here's a piece of paper, oh, by the way, look them up, that's not gonna work. A quick explanation, they'll be more than happy to cooperate. But if you don't explain it to them, it's not gonna work.
One other thing that we also talked about that we think will be really valuable is sometimes people rotate through those positions, so they do it when their kid's a junior or a senior. And by the time the season's over, they just sort of understand the flow of the whole year or the flow of the season. So we're working on writing documents that can be shared year after year that sort of sets, not just from a technical perspective, but here's the flow of this, whether it's a booster club for an athletic thing or the musical, here's historical averages about what's been raised, here are timelines that people work to and adhere to, and it's less technical, but it's more just, so people don't have to reinvent it every year, and then ideally those documents would be living documents, so the costs and the averages get updated over time, and shifts happen over time.
I mean, that makes sense, because the worst case scenario is the head of the booster club's a senior parent. They hand it over to maybe a junior parent, and they're gone, and maybe the parent doesn't feel comfortable calling them and saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what this is. There's a checkbook here, there's all these receipts in a box, and there's gotta be a better way of doing it, a flow, and that makes sense.
Another question, well, two things, I guess, is there any room for automation? Again, like kind of to your point of like reinventing, not reinventing the wheel, but like there seems like there might be a role that technology can play in all of this to centralize things and make it easier and kind of have one, you know, T&E process, one something that everyone is following and kind of buying into.
Can you explain what you're thinking of?
I'm thinking of, I mean, you know, when I worked for a company, there was an easy way to scan a receipt and have it go in and have payment done that way. Or spreadsheets, like, so that everyone's not recreating their own Excel spreadsheet, but that there's a format for people that gets saved on a database where there are logins and things like that.
If they were part of the district, we could do that, but they are not part of the district, and we cannot be part of their record keeping process, bill payment, we can't be part of that. That gets into a very tricky legal area. So it would be something that if the booster clubs got together and created it, they could find some place to do it, but the district can't be part of that.
Okay, but it might still be facilitating. The other person.
And when she says district, that means coaches. Coaches can't be controlling, directing, and doing these things because they're employees of the district.
Right.
Because booster clubs are totally independent. It's not slush funds for coaches.
Yeah, Rich is right. Originally, when we formed this, was here, there were coaches signing the checks.
Yeah.
And that just can't be.
Yeah.
No, we've,
It doesn't happen.
no.
Does
I didn't
this
mean to interrupt.
include, it's okay, does this include the, each of the class years? And
No,
their
this is-
finances?
This is co-curricular. This is specifically for the booster clubs, PTOs, parent organizations outside. Student activity guidelines include the classes and activities. It's two separate things.
But there are guidelines for.
There are guidelines for the student activities. Again, Christopher and I have looked at them, and he's working on ongoing processes with those. So we should have a much easier time going forward.
And also similar, the thing I was describing before, like a 4-year sequence of fundraising for a class officer or a class advisors or co-class advisors, so they have more context that people have had in the past.
The school committee owns the co-curricular guidelines. Who owns the other
The
student activities?
The student activities,
Yeah.
the school committee hasn't approved them.
All right, have we revised them recently? 'Cause it's been a long time since I've seen them. Or do they need revising?
I don't believe they need revising.
That's
What
all I
I
need to
did,
hear.
what I did see, because, and I'll tell you why, because we used it based on the DESI student activity guidelines based on the laws and case laws. What I did see is when you approved the guideline, the student activity guidelines, we changed the class, holding on to class accounts from 2 years to 1 year. But the policy hasn't changed. So the policy still says 2 years, so the policy,
Policy, the school policy.
the school committee policy. So the guidelines say 1 year and the policy says 2. And the recommendation from DESI is 12 to 18 months. So we went to 1 year. So the policy would need to.
So that should come to the policy subcommittee next meeting.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay, are we
Thank
okay with that? So the next one is fairly straightforward. There's a little memo in your packet about requesting a waiver for 7th and 8th graders to be eligible to wrestle. Let me do that, but I skipped one and I'll come back to it. Right. And the memo describes low participation, which is one of our considerations, and particularly in the lower weights, right? So if you're a 18 or 19-year-old senior, it's hard to wrestle at 98 pounds, right? I mean, sometimes people do it, but it's hard. So many other teams throughout the county have had this past practice. And the nice thing that's built into this is it is connected to weights and weight classes. And while I would acknowledge that a 19-year-old 98-pounder is likely stronger than a 7th grade 98-pounder, they do weigh the same, right? So that's the limit that you might not see in football or soccer or some other sports. So this comes to us with the support of the principal, with the support of the athletic co-curricular director, and with the support of coaches, as well as the existing community youth wrestling programs.
Discussion?
Most of the schools we wrestle against probably have 7th and 8th grade, combined middle school, so they have 7th and 8th graders wrestling. Is that
Yeah, so I can speak to this, because I've been a youth coach for the last 10 years, so, and I've been advocating and pushing or hoping this would come up the last 10 years. So I'm glad to see it. Yeah, so there's 13 other teams in our Western Mass district. 10 of them have had 7th and 8th graders for 25, 30 years. The only 3 that don't are the vocational schools, Taconic, Smith Oak, and Franklin Tech, because they don't have a feeder program. So they're really successful, they've all done it. We just, being one of the smallest 9 through 12 schools, we don't have those statistical outliers for, kids at 106 pounds, 113 pounds. We do have one senior who's like 113 or whatever, but he's gonna have no one to practice with. We don't have anyone coming. We might have hopefully one, but you get that issue of the lighter weight classes in this kind of, because of the school's so small. So yeah, it's the norm. Everyone across the state does it. As far as a competitive standpoint, I take the youth 7th, 8th graders to Albany, and they wrestle a lot higher competition than high school kids in here. So I mean, the degrees can vary. It's not a very high level of competition to use Division III Massachusetts wrestling anyway. So it's a contact sport, but it's not a high impact sport. You don't get the collisions like football, soccer, and basketball. So I mean, you get twisted arms and legs and extremities, but not the core, the spine, and head injuries that you worry about in sports as much. Man,
Do I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion to approve by Rich, second by Bill Vogt, discussion.
Why are the numbers low?
Well, I think they're right about average for our being a school we are. I mean, there's, between 10 and 15, which is, I think pretty good for the size of our school, and that's probably similar to others. Just going along, I mean, I think, again, for being a small school, these individual sports, I think really fit our niche, even though they're not a team sport. So you can have schools with 4 or 5 kids on a team, and those kids can excel, they can be New England champions. So, this is, similar to swimming or cross-country, which one we have 2 fantastic ones, both the boys and girls team. These kind of sports, I think, are critical for small schools because, no matter how many kids participate, you can have a chance to succeed and go on. But I'd say these are right around average for our region, our size school.
I will say, Bill, generally, that the main problem across all of our sports is specialization. Nobody plays 3 sports anymore.
That's what I was gonna say.
You know?
It's not just wrestling, it's every sport, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No, I talked to the Mount Everett coach about a year ago, Lupion.
Yeah.
And we were talking, he was doing some work on my house. And I remembered what he said, is that this is a difficult sport. This is a sport that is not like other sports that you show up and practice. This is a sport that takes a lot out of you, that demands a lot of you, that you have to show up, and that he's not seeing that anymore. That there are so many other things out there that, in his opinion, that's one of the reasons his numbers are low also. And it's kind of disappointing in a way that kids aren't rising to the challenge. He said his numbers are that way because the nature of the sport, it's not like other sports. And then we got into the whole thing, are we facing where kids, well, I don't have to practice today, okay? Or, the discipline that is needed in wrestling. And I loved high school wrestling when I was teaching because we had good teams. One of the things is that the coaches went out and recruited kids. And I'm wondering if that could happen. If people who are involved in the wrestling at the high school, are they recruiting kids? Charlie used to go out and if a kid was kind of like, he wasn't sure whether he was gonna stay in school or not, he would give him a reason to stay in school. And so I'm wondering, do we need to have more of that in-house kind of participation than, and I believe the coach that we have is not part of the school, comes in, right?
No, but I do think, we have Gordy and Eddie, who
Yeah.
are both former wrestlers.
Right, yeah.
And they do recruit, so I think
Okay.
it is there. I think it's, the push for, all different sports. So I think it's just,
Having teachers and educators in school coaching tremendously enhances the
Right.
program across the board. And we're really, that's a real crisis we have right now.
So Bill, I've been always against 7th and 8th graders playing high school sports, but the reality is when star athletes at our school, when you taught, when I went to school there, were expected and wanted to play 3 sports, it doesn't happen anymore. They individualize, they play AAU ball during other seasons, and if there's no one to recruit, there's no one to recruit. And before, it was great to watch them excel in sports that they had to use different muscles, they had to use different thought processes. But now, if they excel in a sport and it's a sport they like, that's what they stay with. And we don't have much of a choice. So as long as it's safe for these kids and it keeps us with a viable program, unfortunately, it's necessary.
And one, other advantage is it's an individual sport, but it's also a team sport. And it's a shame to see a team forfeit 5 weight classes and then struggle with their overall win-loss thing. So we fill some weight classes and the likelihood of them being successful increases.
Yeah, and my boys played all different sports, and wrestling, I have to say, is one of the ones that not only physically made them stronger, mentally made them stronger, and even though it was individual, the family aura of even all the individuals, I mean, they're so close, even though everybody has their own little weight classes, they all have each other's backs, they're all following up with each other, they're a really close-knit group of young men and sometimes young women.
So we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I am.
One opposed, any abstentions? It passes.
Can I just mention one more quick thing I was gonna say?
Of course.
Because this pertains to all sports, I mean, I'm a big proponent for all seventh and eighth graders. I mean, just to kind of echo on Madeline Hardy, who was a senior in the previous, student rep, she did the prevention needs assessment. And I'm gonna quote her in a report when she said, "The value of sports and friendship is a protective factor. Most students do not drink or use substances while they're in season for a sport. That feeling of belonging on the team and concern about athletic ability overrides the feeling of belonging that students get while drinking." So, I mean, from that perspective, I mean, I'll vote for every seventh and eighth grade sport that we have. I mean, it's not just, sport itself or the team. I mean, it's actually, to be able to get these kids involved 5 days a week, is a proven factor in preventing from substance abuse and other problems. So, if there's ever any more, Christopher, I'll be happy to make a motion to approve any other future seventh and eighth grade waivers. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you.
Okay, so I mixed up my order a little bit. So the next one I want to do, and then Rachel will get to you after that, is a new job description for co-facilitators for affinity groups. I think I mentioned this to you in the past. We run a number of different affinity groups at the different buildings, a BIPOC group at the elementary school, and a GSA and a BIPOC group at each of the middle and high school. In response to some of what we learned from last year, I want to make a structural shift so that we have co-facilitators for each of those groups. So if somebody were to leave or get sick, there's another internal trusted adult that's well prepared and qualified to work with students. Within this, and it's separate, I also express a very strong interest to working with community partners from the organizations that can be supportive, like the Department of Justice Spirit Program or any number of other local partners we have. One little amendment I'd like to make is in the preferred qualifications. Right now I've got 3 things, and I'd like to add a 4th one, and I'm happy to wordsmith it with people if they want, but in chatting with the school committee member before the meeting, they thought it might be nice to add something like demonstrated sensitivity to working with a range of diverse students, in addition to the 3 that I already have there. Intentionally, this is open-ended because I imagine over time, the needs for different affinity groups might change. So I'm not, in this document, naming all the characteristics of those affinity groups. I'm leaving it relatively open-ended.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by Bill Vogt. Discussion.
Peter, did you talk with the current affinity facilitators to get their help in drafting this job description?
I did not to get their help in drafting this job description. The principals have checked in with them. And at various times I've shared that the job description is important, but it's just a mechanism to let me post it and then hire people. I think the biggest shift is a commitment to having 2 co-facilitators in each role, because it's a structural shift.
I agree, but I think the job description sets expectations and it becomes kind of that touch point to be able to refer back to. And I just, given that I think we've had some that have worked out well, some that have not worked out well, I like the idea of you adding something there, and I'm just wondering if there's any more, without getting too specific, but if there's any more specificity that would be useful to make sure that we're attracting and retaining the right people for this role.
So one thing I might propose, if people would be amenable to it, is I do feel a sense of urgency around this, and if it's possible to approve it now, and as I check in with people to amend it and bring it back in the future, I think waiting another 2 weeks till our next meeting to then post it, and then wait another week or two, could really get us into November. And I'm anxious about that much time passing before I can get people in the roles.
So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous.
Okay, thank you for that. So the last one, Rachel, sorry, I promised to get you sooner. And every once in a while, people get talking about technical co-curricular guideline language. Rachel's one of our French teachers at the high school. She's proposing a neat trip to study abroad in France, also with an exchange. It's well articulated in the packet. It has the support of the principal and me. And I'd like to ask for your support. And she's here to respond to questions if folks have questions about it.
Anyone have any questions?
How proficient are they in French already? The perspective.
Well, there's a mix, there's about half the kids going would be AP, they're really strong, 4 out of those 5. Got the seal of biliteracy on their diploma on their Apple tests last year, and the other 2 were also really strong. And then the other students who are, I'm keeping it open to juniors and seniors because I anticipate this happening every other year, so for them to have a chance to do it, they've got to be junior, senior, and sophomores and freshmen would obviously have another chance. So there is couple students in French 3, I'm opening it up to, because once we get above a threshold of 11 students, the price goes down through the tour company we're working with. So I'm trying to get between 11 and 14, ideally, and they're all very strong. I mean, there's a few who want to come, who's I might have a couple of concerns about, but that's when you craft it with a family who has some English, are comfortable English speakers, right? So, yeah, but they're very strong.
Good. Other questions?
Not so much of Rachel, but maybe Peter, but is there comparable trips being planned for the Spanish students?
Christopher, so he's signaling me, which I think means yes, but.
Yeah, so, Rachel?
I can speak to that.
Yeah, great idea, actually.
I mean, what we were hoping to do is so that this is something that's like a position that's funded, ideally, that this could be like the French club, and this, not having this year, but maybe in future, it's the travel club, sorry, not the French club, but the travel club, where there's a Spanish or French teacher, probably, although it doesn't have to be, who's the leader of that, and then every other year, a trip is planned. So a trip to a Spanish-speaking country, a trip to a French-speaking country, a trip to a Spanish-speaking. So that's the idea, but we do have the teacher teaching AP is new this year, so it's fair to not throw her in, so you have to do this in addition their first year, so that's just a conversation we're having in the world languages department about what that's gonna look like.
I think it would be ideal, personally, and I think, I know it's fantastic for our community. I think of all of these things and the impact, positive impact we can have on our community, on our school, on, this becoming an even greater place, and people more people to be here, frankly. So, I thought that was a brilliant idea to have sort of co-advisors for travel club, we'll call it, and say, we're gonna do France this year, we're gonna do, or a French-speaking country this year, a Spanish-speaking country next year. Great.
Yeah, one of the things the school committee has always said, and I know you have funding sources in your suggestions, what's really needed, previous school committees said, we don't want to see anyone not go because they just can't afford it.
Yeah.
That we want to see all students, we have an equal chance. So
Yeah.
I don't have an answer how to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just our wish.
Well, that's what my work is right now, 'cause I've already had more students come to me than in the past, because we did this 2 years ago. And so I'm telling them to apply to Berkshire Hills Fund for Excellence, which funded several students last time, also School Center Fund,
I guess it's now called Not Schools That Are Ink, which both gave, and I can't remember the amounts that they gave, but, and we're also gonna get ahead of our prep sales, which we did, last time, and we made a good amount of money, so we're gonna get those, as soon as we get approval, my colleague and I are gonna start, organizing those, and we could at least fund one kid through that. One student got a full ride last time through a fund that was discretionary, for the principal, and that was great, but I'm not sure that's necessarily gonna be around, so we're exploring a lot of different things, but if you
That's
have more
true.
ideas, please let me know.
No, I only have suggestions, no ideas, that's the problem. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Jason and Bill Fields,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
motion and second, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Unanimous, good luck to you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let us know about the prep sale and many of us will show up.
Yes.
Well, I will just say that, like, when the students come here, because the French students will be coming here at the end of February, and that was a really, we had a great assembly when they came, so that's always gonna be amazing to have, and school committee members to come and.
Please.
I'm just wondering what the Spanish speaking, I'm assuming the Spanish speaking community is larger in the school. So I'm wondering how that works with the trip, whether there can be such a large enough trip that allows everybody that wants to go, or.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something worth discussing. Historically, when the Spanish teachers took students, I think they had a slightly bigger group than the 11 to 14 range.
It seems like it would be worthwhile to put it on as a future agenda item, just because I think we should come to like a philosophical agreement on whether or not we want to support this, and we think this is important, and these types of initiatives should not be teacher specific, but actually ingrained, I think, in the curriculum or in the school offerings
Or in the budget.
or in the budget.
Yeah.
I mean, to me though, I mean, it's a big ask, like I'm thankful that Rachel's doing this, but I mean, like this, I don't think this is in the job description and we don't pay the teachers extra, so it's got, I mean, it's like their sacrifice.
I think under that format, though, that's a possibility.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Support
getting
that.
at.
I mean,
That's why I think you should come up with a
Right,
future
I mean, they're
agenda
leaving
item.
she's got her own family, her own kids and everything, she's leaving them for a week and putting herself out there, so,
And for once,
Yeah.
I'll read one of these stipends on the personnel report and understand what they actually do.
so I think, yeah, I think that's.
If you
Yeah.
think it's important enough and we want to support it,
Right.
then we should figure out a way to make it happen and make it fair and possible for everyone, and not just depend or have the good fortune of somebody who wants to put in that personal time.
Okay, we will do that.
Thank you. Okay, so, yeah, thanks. So the next two things are two memorandums of understanding, and they're both connected to the Du Bois Regional Middle School, and they're both interconnected. One of them's around, so you do a memorandum of understanding when you deviate from the existing practices or contract, and you do it to solve a short-term problem and sometimes to buy time to solve it more deliberately and thoughtfully over time. These are both connected to the exploratory schedule, so classes like health and music and art and a few other ones that I'm not mentioning right now. And part of the way we use our time with teachers and kids in exploratory classes is quite intentional to free up teachers in other classes to have time during the day to meet, right? Which has the potential to be a tremendous lever for collegiality and professionalism and embedded ongoing professional development and moving work forward. So if there are 80 or 90 kids in a particular grade, and all those kids at a certain time are doing something with exploratory teachers, the remaining English, math, science, social studies teachers can work and plan and talk about kids and do stuff together. The point of this is to put a Band-Aid on a complicated schedule and let us continue to do that. We work very closely with the BHEA on both of these at the building level and at the broader level. And the first one is just about the schedule, and the second one, or depending which way you're looking at it, is working with a local nonprofit to have them offer 2 classes on environmental studies to round out how students' needs are met to meet the bigger thing that I explained about freeing up the time. So I strongly recommend both of them. The work of Jake and his team will be to come up with a refined, better schedule during the year, so we're not dependent on this going forward.
I have a motion to start with.
We take them separately, you think, or do we?
Well, we can do them together. I think Peter's explaining them together.
Motion approved.
Second. So I have a motion by Rich, a second by Bill Vogt, discussion.
On the memorandum of understanding about the exploratory schedule at Du Bois, in item number 5, at the end, it'll be presented to the buildings administration prior to the end of September 2024. So there are 5 days left in September. Is that realistic or?
I think it was realistic when we wrote it, but it took a while for it to get here. Would you like to recommend we change it to October 24? I'm happy to make that change.
It just doesn't seem realistic to.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're setting yourself up for failure.
No, nice catch. Thank you.
Peter, can you remind us, I feel like we voted on an MOU that had to do with exploratory schedules at Du Bois in the spring.
Rob?
Yes, there was this is the second in a series of MOUs dealing with the exploratory schedule. The first one created complications at the beginning of the school year, the middle school, I think is probably the best way to describe it. And it required pretty much a complete rethink. And so this MOU is essentially an update on the previous MOU that is significantly different, or different enough that the BHEA asked that we present this to the school committee for approval as an MOU. And this would supersede the previous MOU that was signed, I think actually in June, July.
And special thanks to Rob for working on the exploratory one. I worked on the Greenagers one. That's how we split the work.
And I give all the credit to Jake Pigston.
Okay.
I am merely.
Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstention? Unanimous.
Okay, so thanks for getting through all of those. The DEIB thing was tied to the postings, and both Jake and I mentioned that we're meeting with the folks from the Department of Justice and the SPEAR program on Monday. And that's significant because the prospect of a government shutdown is looming. Though it's probably.
No, it's
It got settled today?
Yeah, we got settled.
Okay, so we scheduled it for Monday the 30th, the last day before the shutdown, so we'd get it in, but now there's no shutdown, so.
We still want you to do it, but you have till December.
Yeah, December 20th.
We're overjoyed. So what I'd like to do now is transition to this MCAS and AP report, and I was joking with some people. It's a very, very long slide deck, and I apologize. We're not going to talk about every slide, but I did want it in a coherent thing that people could use as a resource document. It'll be we're up editing it to the last minute, and it'll be in our school committee packet tomorrow or Monday. Online, yeah. Right, or Monday at the latest. I'm going to talk through some of it, and then principals and Colin are going to talk through other parts of it. We'll stop at there are really 4 breaking points. So there's a high-level overview that I'll talk through, and then we'll stop at the end of that, and there'll be some questions. And then each of the principals will talk about, in many cases, their inherited data, right? This is data from last year that that they came to. And then towards the end, Colin will talk about something. And then at the very end, I'll come back and foreshadow something else we're gonna do. Okay? So let me just share my slides and you can look at it. Oh. Hang on. I don't like sharing it this way. So I'm going to talk through some of these. This, and Bill, I think this is a piece that you'll appreciate, right? And I'm sorry that there's so many bullet points, but I wanted to remember this. As we talk about MCAS and AP scores, it's one piece of evidence. It's not the only piece of evidence. This is hotly debated, right? But it's one tool in our toolkit to reflect on what's going on. You'll see English and math scores in 3rd through 8th grade plus 10th grade, and then science scores in 5th and 8th grade plus a test that mostly kids take in 9th grade that's reported out as 9th and 10th grade. Okay, so then that's the biology one. The analysis of this informs our thinking, working, and professional development. The highlights, right? There's some successes and things we're really proud of, and some struggles and real areas for growth. It can be particularly useful when we disaggregate groups and do a really detailed item analysis. And we're going to do a little disaggregating tonight, but we're not going to do a lot of item analysis, and we're going to come back on some of that. And item analysis could be like how many people demonstrated their understanding in problem solving, and then you can link that to the curriculum, and then you can sort of look at who was successful in what context and who wasn't and why, and use that to inform shifts in your practice. But that level of detail we're saving for a future meeting. There's a significant and really troubling correlation between income and achievement, right? And that's locally, but it's also across the whole county. So if you think of if I asked you what are the wealthiest communities in Berkshire County, you rattle off some list of them in order, and that would almost be perfectly correlated with the highest achieving communities in Berkshire County, right? And that's interesting and in some contexts troubling. And one of the things we're hoping to do is to be like a beating the odds school where, and somebody I used to work for would say, demographics and particularly zip codes shouldn't be your destiny, right? You can work really well and outperform. We're going to look at both achievement and growth. So absolute achievement's really important, but also growth is really important, right? And somebody might move 2 grade levels in a year, and we should have a cake and a big party over that. And that might be a bigger deal than somebody who came in scoring at a very high level and maintained their high level or even went down a little bit, right? So you need to balance both of those. We're going to look at some places where gaps are being closed, and to foreshadow something, there are a couple places where that's really happening and it's really exciting. And then there's more nuanced places where it's happening, but it's a little harder to pick apart. And then we'll come back at a future meeting with a more detailed cohort analysis, which should also be telling. Okay, so big things. This is how we're seen from an accountability perspective, and this is our percentile rank within the state. So 3 schools in order, the Muddy Brook is the 63rd, Du Bois is the 28th, and Monument is the 53rd. And if you look across, you can see that sort of how that's changed, right? And in some cases it's gone up, and in some cases it went up and then it went down, and in some cases it's gone down. So that's one way of looking at it. The accountability system considers all of these factors: achievement, growth, high school completion, progress towards English proficiency, so that's for the multilingual learners, chronic absenteeism, and advanced coursework completion, right? You almost need a PhD in statistics to run those numbers.
So these are where these schools rank in the state?
In the state, yes.
So a higher number is worse.
No, a higher number is better.
This is percentile.
Percentile, not rank.
Percentile, yeah, right. So, and then we'll show you some other things, right? Later in the slide deck, there's a comparison of schools in Berkshire County. And then Colin pulled a really neat slide, which is a comparison of schools that are similar size and have similar demographics to us. Because that's really, our cohort isn't necessarily Berkshire County. Our cohort are districts with 1,200 kids with 42 to 50% low-income students and 21% students with special needs, and maybe 73% white students and 27% students of color, right? So we'll share a slide about that. This talks a little bit about first, how students are evaluated on these assessments, and you see these 4 boxes across the top. So exceeding expectations and meeting expectations, and then the other 2 are partially meeting and not meeting. We focus a lot on exceeding and meeting as those 2 together, and that gives you a number, and that's reported a lot. And then the other thing we focus on is moving people from the 3rd and 4th box over to the 1st and 2nd box, right? So you want to have, over time, fewer and fewer students not meeting and more students meeting or exceeding, and over time, move young people from a partially meeting to meeting or exceeding. So that's one piece of it. The second thing is just a little like key to student growth percentile. So anything above 40 is positive for student growth, and things above 50 or 55 start getting really exciting. Every once in a while you see something in the 60 or 59 range or 65 range, and that's something we should be really excited about. It's very, very rare to see things in the 80 to 99% range. And if you do, it likely means that for some reason, the year before, it was a disaster. And that's the only way you do 80 to 99%, right? So get excited by seeing it, but then ask the next question: what happened the year before or 2 years before? Okay, are people with me still? So this is through this group, Open Architects, and this is an interesting data set because this is a snapshot of English language arts across all the buildings over the last 5 years. And the turquoise, or however you want to describe that solid line, is the district meeting and exceeding, and the dotted line is the state, right? All grades. And this is so sort of aggregated. It doesn't tell you a whole lot, but English scores across the state went down a little bit, and ours were pretty stable. And the gap between us and the state is is 7% this year in the meeting and exceeding. And the average scale score is 498, and so the state's average scale score is 495. Student growth across the district is 49.2, which is down like less than a point from the state average and in the previous year. And it's sort of in that sweet spot, like the 49.2 is fine for student growth, right? It'd be better if it was 60, but it's quite typical.
Is there a COVID factor here?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? So you notice if you look carefully at the chart, if you could see it, that 2020 is not included at all. And though I sort of promised I was going to stop talking about like recovering from COVID, it's like a lingering hangover, right?
Well, it doesn't appear for us, but I can tell you the article on the Globe today about the English dip, that all the people in the state and the union are blaming COVID.
Right, but then.
Not saying I agree with that, but.
So foreshadowing, when Christopher talks about the 10th grade English scores, you're gonna see the opposite, right? So there was a big increase in the 10th grade English scores, and I'm stealing his thunder and ruining his day, but.
You gotta start going first.
Yeah.
Pressure's on it. I think
This is the takeaway.
Yeah, we'll change it up, right? So some meetings you get to go first. So the math is a little bit of a difference, right? And you see now the state's dotted line is above us, and this year we're actually underperforming in math compared to the state. And I feel really strongly we should be outperforming the state. So we'll dig into this. There's some funky things that happened last year that speak to some of this, but this is another thing to unpack. The students meeting and exceeding went down, the comparison to the state average went down, the scale score went down, and the average student growth also went down. And now we're sort of on the bottom range of that chart that I shared where it was 40 to 60. So this is an identified area for additional work. The last one is science, and this is a little funky because it's 5th grade, 8th grade, and a test kids take in 9th grade, but it's really reported in 10th grade. And we were below the state, and now we're just above. I mean, last year we were pretty significantly above the state. Now we're a couple points above the state. And growth isn't included because the growth is calculated year over year, and with the test being in 5th, 8th, and 9th grade, they can't calculate growth. And then the 9th grade test, which is reported in 10th, is harder to compare to the 5th and 8th grade ones. Okay, high level overview. Here's another way of looking at it. So when you see any slides like this with the bar graphs in the blue and the red and a lot of aqua or teal or whatever color that is, that's stuff done through a data analysis group called Open Architects, and we have software that lets us do this. And when you see the things that are more colorful with colors that contrast poorly, and you'll see it when we get to them, that's straight off DESI's website, right? So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The thing that's interesting about this is over here, you see all these schools. So we have 3 schools in our district, right? But they're like 8 listed there. Those schools are out of district placements where we assign kids and their data is assigned to us. And you might say, that's crazy, like, you're not responsible, it's not your thing. And when Rob and I talked about this, we decided to present it with all the schools because they are our kids, but an alternate presentation, we could have just had our 3 our 3 schools. And then this is a little complicated. So this is student growth over time, and they're sorry, I just need too many things going on my screen. This is student growth over time, and in this instance, each of those lines is attached to one of those schools, right? And this is easier to read on a printed copy or on your own laptop. Other times, those lines will be attached to demographic identifiers, so it could be race or it could be income. But in this instance, the lines are tied to individual schools. So this is for ELA. This one is for math. And this is also sort of a funky thing that happens. I don't know how many students are at Mill Pond right now. I could look it up, but you see Mill Pond had really nice growth. My hunch is that there are like 3 students in Mill Pond or 2, and they did really well. So their average growth is off the charts, but statistically it's problematic because it's 2 kids. And we can come back and dig into that some. And now here's the one that people like to look at. So this is the countywide thing. I think there are 2 pages of it. There are a couple things that are really interesting here. First is how much each district spends per pupil. Right away, if you're sharp, you're going to notice that we're way outspending everybody. Right? We think that not only are grants included in this, so that's one of the issues, but there's an issue with how municipal districts bill their insurance really to the town, and whether that is then counted in their school reported per number. So that explains. Some are and some aren't, right? So that can explain part of it too. The next line that's really interesting is the percent of low income. So we're reported at 43.4, and it's actually a little higher in the elementary and middle school and a little lower in the high school. And you read straight across, right? So Southern Berkshire is 38.1, Lenox is 24.3, and on and on and on. If you remember at the opening, I was talking about how achievement is almost perfectly correlated to income. If you look at this, without even looking at the numbers, who would you expect would have the highest achievement?
Lennox.
Yeah, Lenox, right? So Lenox is percent of low income students is 24.3, followed closely by Greylock, which is 25.1, and Richmond's also in the 25s, 25.9. And in many cases, though not all, there's a pattern where if you circle the highest percentage of meeting and exceeding, Lenox would be number 1, right? Greylock would be number 2. Berkshire Hills, beating the odds, might be number 3, though from an economic standpoint, we might be needier than some of our neighboring districts. So you can dig into this, and this gets very strange because some of the like Hancock's data isn't in here, I don't think, but class or grades in Richmond and Bart are very small, and classes and grades in Pittsfield are quite large. I think probably Central Berkshire or is the closest to us overall, or if you're just looking at economics, Lee. But this is sort of a shift. A percentage of low-income students. If we'd done this a few years ago, Lee would have had a higher percentage than us, and now we have a higher percentage than Lee. And then, if you want to dig into this later, you could go down, and And I won't go into this because this is what the principals are going to talk about, right? But you could circle which of the districts are doing particularly well and which are struggling, and which grades are interesting things happening and which aren't. Right, hard to make sense of all of this. What I'm going to do, and I'll ask you all to come up, is first Cynthia, and then Jake, and finally Christopher. But just for tonight, the last night we're doing is Christopher, to come up and talk about it. And as you're talking, tell me, and I'll click the slides.
So a little bit different than both Jake and Chris, I do own some of this data. I have been at Moneybrook for 3 years. I'm just gonna say that up front. Did you switch?
No, well, just tell me.
Okay, so, like we said, in Moneybrook, it's our 3rd and 4th grade that take the MCAS. This first slide is our combined scores for English language arts. It's noticeable here, the first thing that I see is that we're 7 percentage points above the state, and that our average student growth percentile is 67%.
Nice. So that's great, right? That's something we should be psyched about.
That's great news. So that's our ELA. Next slide. This is our math data for both 3rd and 4th grade. This slide shows us dipping just below the state. And our average student growth percentile is 56%, which is above 40, right? 40 is the number you want to be above 40. But this is concerning. We have a new math program. This is our 2nd year with it. You know, people like to say there's always an implementation dip. That was what I said last year. So this is work that we need to do. And we will. Next slide.
And just before Cynthia talks, so this is the state presented data from the DESE website, and that's why it's orange, green, and blue, and maroon.
So just an orientation, this is just 3rd grade data is broken out. The top colorful chart is English language arts, and the one at the bottom is math. And then over on the left-hand side, you see the breakdown of exceeding and meeting expectations, partially meeting and not meeting expectations. On this slide, you'll see that our ELA is somewhat in line with the state, and that our math is below the state. This is our 4th grade data. Again, same setup, ELA is up top and math is below. Our ELA data, we performed better than the state. And our math, we have a higher rate of partially meeting, and yeah, that's it. We performed, I guess, lower than the state in some areas and higher than the state.
But the not meeting is significantly lower than the
Yes.
state's not meeting.
Correct. Thank you.
Good.
Yes. This next slide is our high needs snapshot. This reflects special education students that are low income on an IEP or have a 504. That's what constitutes high needs. Both of these graphs, you'll see we are below the state. In ELA, which is on the left-hand side, our gap remains somewhat steady. you'll see in math, we're actually going in the wrong direction. Again, this is work that, that we need to do in our tier 2 and our tier 3. So in our intervention programs, we do have 2 high-quality intervention teachers. We have 3 high-quality special education teachers. We are working on this. We do not have a tier 3 math curriculum. It's something that's been a gap at our school for quite a while now. It's probably a gap across the state as well. So we're looking into that. This is work that we will be doing.
And one other thing I'll just flag is the student growth percentile on the left side is one of the higher ones we'll see. Right, so for they were doing a lot to support and move high need students.
So without interrupting, because it's gonna take a long time, how do you explain that being high and our numbers going down?
So this is the sort of thing I was trying to foreshadow, which is if somebody's coming in struggling, your achievement could still be medium or even low, but if just to simplify it, if it's a 3rd grader reading at a 1st grade level, they might have moved them a year and a half in a year, which is a huge deal, but they're still reading at a 2nd and a half grade level, right? So usually when you see this, it foreshadows something, like it's setting them up for something better down the road.
Yep. And this slide is a slide that is an interesting slide. It gives us a visual on racial categories and subgroups. The Caucasian is the dark green line that you'll see right sort of in the middle. The other lighter bluish line is our multi-race line, and that is remarkably above, which is wonderful news. Again, our subgroup sizes are so small that it can be thought of as, you know, somewhat complicated. If you have just one student, can really swing this data.
Right, and so usually the state won't report this if it's, depending how many variables it is, if it's fewer than 10 or 12 students, or sometimes even fewer than 24 students. So in some of these, it's 4 kids. Take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and the Asian subgroup also did remarkably well in both 3rd and 4th grade, ELA and in math. Any questions?
Okay, so we're through the first 2 of 4 parts, so we're halfway there. No, but there's my big introduction, right?
There's a Mighty Brook picture for boys.
Who could have done that?
3 choices and you got it wrong.
Yeah.
We'll be changing the Muddy Brook picture for a Du Bois picture on the Du Bois slide.
Are these going to be available to us?
Yeah, so this will all be available. I said that at the beginning, so either I'll drop it in the folder tomorrow, or worst case, I'll drop it in the folder Monday. We're gonna make a couple edits, so like that picture will come out, and they'll be available. The other thing I should have shared was, all this data was embargoed until Tuesday, so we've had access to it, but we didn't have access to the state data till Tuesday, and it didn't get into the open architect system till this morning at 5:30. So Colin and Rob and the principals did some really nice work to turn this around, and I made a note for myself that next year, when we schedule the school committee meeting after the release of MCAS scores, we should schedule it not 2 days after the day they release it, but 10 days after. So we have a cushion.
Jake, you good?
Yes, I'm good. So, in approaching MCAS, I've served in districts where, talking to the Du Bois faculty and staff about our MCAS scores, I likened it to, a house of worship. Like I happen to worship in a particular house of worship, St. Paul's, about 2 blocks down the street from here. But I admire many other religious traditions and architecture that belong to traditions that aren't my own. So I tend to look at the MCAS as a house of worship that is not where I am likely to bow down and worship, but I can admire the architecture. I can admire the history. I can admire the tradition. In Pittsfield, we bow down and worshiped at the altar of the MCAS. And Mount Greylock, we walked by and said, "Oh, that's a nice building," and kept on moving. And so, as I would tell my own children, all of whom grew up in the MCAS era, the MCAS says an awful lot about a lot of things, but what it doesn't indicate is how smart you are. It doesn't necessarily indicate how hardworking you are. It says a lot about your curriculum. It says a little something about your teachers. It says a little something about, the approach to school. So it tells us a lot of things, and we're working hard to figure out what it is telling us in Du Bois. So looking at our, if we can move on to the ELA, overall in ELA, we're just right about where the state is. Very little growth, we're really just right where we were last year and where the state is. Moving forward to math, we had a dip, I'm fortunate enough to be leading a school where every single grade is subject to the MCAS test. Last year, our 8th graders did not have a permanent math teacher until I believe November. And that kind of thing shows in this data. And so, but it also gives us an opportunity to look at what we're doing, when we're doing it, and to what degree we're doing it. If we look at science, some slight declines and no student growth percentiles in science. If we move on to grade 5 ELA and math, grade 5 ELA, we're at or maybe a little bit above where the state is, and grade 5 mathematics, we're very similar. We look very similar to where the state is. And the growth percentiles for those groups are both robust in that grade. They don't show on that slide, but that's a data point that I'm really most interested in, particularly if you really dive deep through some tools that the state gives us. You can see the grade level student growth percentile, but you can actually go in and see individual students. And that to me is really telling, and looking at kids that I know are capable of learning at an efficient rate. And if their percentile is really low, that's telling me a different story about their class experience perhaps. So we won't get into that depth tonight, but it is the depth that we are going into in our school. Science results, you can see we're again, mirroring the state by and large, a few more students meeting expectations, a couple of fewer students exceeding expectations. We get into grade 6. ELA, we are, I think by almost any measure, exceeding what our districts across the state are doing. 6th grade mathematics is an area that we've already really dug into and began to as soon as we had access to the scores and as soon as we were able to start talking about them. This is concerning. If the student growth percentiles were up here, you would see that for 6th grade math as a whole, our 6th graders' student growth percentile was right around 24–25%. And as Peter laid out earlier, the state really likes to see 40–50% as where we're starting to feel good and that our students are making the progress that they need to progress through to the high school. So this is one that we're paying some special attention to. We are very grateful to be in a district that has a district instructional coach. We've already spent quite a bit of time with Beth Cook around this, and I know that Beth is working with the teachers who are doing this work, and we're grateful for that work. Moving on to 7th grade ELA math results. Really in ELA, we're pretty closely mirroring the state. Again, we're just not substantially below where the state is in 7th grade. But we should be, I'm with Dr. Dillon, we should be exceeding the state averages, knowing all of the students that go into that mix. Grade 8 ELA, you know, in mathematics, you can see that I think we could make a general case that Du Bois had an interesting year last year, and in some ways a challenging year, more than some of their middle school colleagues across the Commonwealth. The upstairs for the 7th and the 8th grade, I think, had a layer of challenge embedded within that challenge, and the 8th grade certainly experienced that. And I look at our 8th graders who are now 9th graders and recognizing that you know, their English experience was really altered last year. It shows in their MCAS scores. You know, our real hope is that, I feel fortunate being an English teacher once upon a time and understanding the way that English builds on previous years' English is really unlike the way sciences build on one another, and really unlike the way that mathematics builds on previous years of mathematics. ELA is really taking the same skills and going a little deeper each year. And so I would have great faith that when we're sitting here a few years from now looking at these young folks as 10th graders, their scores will be right where we would expect them to be. 8th grade science, again, not that far out of the ballpark from where the state is, but again, I think I know the quality of the work. These are all classrooms that I've been in, and you know, trying to tease out the year that these folks had, trying to tease out on their 3rd principal in 3 years. There's just lots of variables. What it doesn't say to me is that our kids are in deep, deep trouble. It doesn't even say to me that our staff is in deep, deep trouble. It simply says that we have some work to do. Looking at our high needs students, again, as Cynthia laid out, you know, high needs is comprising our multilingual learners, our students on 504 plans, who have a certain type of disability, students with perhaps learning challenges and learning nuances that are on IEP, and also includes students that are low income and whose home lives don't reflect the advantages that perhaps a middle class or above middle class family would have. And I have something more to say on high needs when we get to the end of this. You know, we think that our high needs students should be right in line with the state. This is definitely a focus area for us. One thing I can suggest that the state doesn't necessarily look at, that I think an area where high needs really intersects with another data point that the state is making a real point of, is chronic absenteeism. I'm sure you're aware that the state's definition of chronic absenteeism is we have 180 days that we spend together a year. A student that misses 18 or more of those days are considered chronically absentee. Of our high needs students, I'm thinking that in the ballpark, I have this written down somewhere, I just need to find it. Of our high needs students, and almost 38% of our students are considered high needs. Of that 38%, 54% of them were chronically absent last year. So these are students who most will benefit from being in school, probably socially as well as academically and certainly emotionally. 54% 54% of those students missed more than 10 days. And about 5% of those students missed more than 20 days. Our highest attending group are Black and African Americans. Our lowest attending group are our multilingual learners and students who are limited English proficiency. So that really suggests to us where some of the laser focus of our work really has to be. It also, non-coincidentally, I think, our multilingual learners and students who are limited English proficiency are also among our students that did not take the test at all, MCAS, at the greatest rate. And they are students that could have, and certainly several of them would have been just fine taking it. So we really have to do a better job of reaching out to families and talking about the fact that, look, this is not used to judge your child. It simply is a data point among many data points that we collect over the course of the year about the heart and soul that is your child and the brain that is your child. And we really want them to be represented in this data. Moving forward, our breakdown of students by racial category, again, our cohorts are so small, you can look at this and make of it what you will when you have, I don't know how much this really means from year to year. I would be really careful. Personally, I would not wanna own too much credit as a corporation for advances or high years. But I think we have to own the years where we're behind and we're not indeed doing the work of closing gaps, because there's just no need for those to exist. And again, this enmeshes very nicely with the work we're trying to do with the Department of Justice Spirit Program. You all know as well as I do that the foundation of academic learning is feeling comfortable, feeling like you belong, feeling competent, and feeling like you're supported by your school, and feeling like you're supported by your family and by your community. And so that's where we're going to put our work into ideally raising all boats and closing gaps. I do have just a couple of other notes. We are definitely looking, particularly in a couple of key areas, at the curriculum itself and within the curriculum, the sequencing of the curriculum. I have a hunch there are things that are being tested year after year that we are not getting to because of the way that the curriculum is sequenced out. And we want our kids to do well. We don't want our kids to do well because it gives us something positive to talk about or get a positive headline about. We want them to do well because that builds confidence in our students and allows them to pursue the other things they want to pursue with more gusto. We're definitely concerned about participation rates. We're definitely concerned about chronic absentee rates. As I said, we're very grateful for the district's instructional coach, Beth, who has already dug in with this and is already doing work with individual teachers. And we also really think at Du Bois in particular, the administration getting into classrooms and actually seeing what is happening on the ground in classrooms is crucial. And we think anywhere that we can facilitate teachers getting into other teachers' classrooms to observe and be of help and to coach, not evaluate, but to provide collegial support is really crucial. So happy to have any questions.
Any questions? Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Christopher, come up. Colin, at some point you might join Christopher for part of this, and we are in the ninth inning. Thank you for hanging in. Are we winning or losing?
So now you're telling Christopher to hurry up because we're late?
Yeah.
That's
But,
all right.
I mean, the
Dr.
interesting thing
McCandless
is-
talks more than I
Yeah,
do.
like, Jake has, like, his kids are tested in every grade in 2 subjects plus science. Christopher only has to talk about 3 tests and then the APs. Bring it on.
So obviously, we have an overview of results for the ELA, math, and science. We test science in 9th grade, biology, math, and ELA in 10th grade. We're gonna have a bit of a demographics breakdown, comparison of other schools in Berkshire County, as well as comparison of other schools that DESI has deemed in our same sort of size, demographic category, et cetera. And then the AP scores. So, you know, we're going through all this information here, and what I generally look at is I look at what percent do we have of kids who either exceeded or met. And then I can compare that to the state. You know, my own personal feeling in schools where I work is, oh, we definitely better than the state. You know, that's just that's where we should be. So here's the math in the ELA. We have roughly 70% meeting or exceeding in ELA, and 48% in math. These are all, again, 10th grade scores. I guess you should keep going because there's no comparison here. And I didn't bring my glasses up either, and I have my note cards, and now I can't read anything. Four-year trend for ELA, it looks pretty good. It dips down in, I think that's 21, 23, and then it comes back up, thank you very much, in 24. But being at 70%, I still can't see it, but that's a great place to be. Can we be higher? Of course we can, but we're proud of that. And there's also a percentage of the kids who are in the partially exceeding, who either need a PPE, a growth plan, or they have met the graduation requirement for ELA. So that was good. Can we keep going, please? Where in terms of math, we started trending down here, and we're going to obviously look at that. As Dr. McCandless said, you know, we got to be sure that we're teaching everything that we're supposed to be teaching, and there's nothing to say that we aren't, but that's also something we're doing as a school. Let's make sure that we have a comprehensive understanding of what we're supposed to be doing for math, all the testing areas, the standards, and that everybody's doing the same thing, right? That's one approach. He also mentioned, thank you for mentioning, Dr. McCandless, chronic absenteeism. That also plays a part, but the bottom line is we have to get kids across the finish line, and that's our intention. So we're looking at our work, and we're gonna expect an improvement in that area there. Science results, we have, ours is at 62 for the district, and the state is always at 49. The other thing that I look at is what percentage of students are not meeting expectations at all. And so we're close to the state on that. Obviously, this is all something that we want to move up. We have a 2-year analysis, I think, on the next slide. 3-year analysis. Going down here, also, you know, it's something we're looking at, already talking with the science department about, you know, do we want to stick with biology? Do we want to stay in the same sequence, biology and physics? Or, you know, there's other schools who do physics first. For me, I always thought physics was a better one to do first because it's more concrete. It's something that kids, I believe, can understand better, but just some different ways of looking at it. And but those conversations have already started as well. Dr. Jones, here's a high needs snapshot. What's really interesting to me here is, actually, Colin, you were going to come over and talk about this, right? Colin, we're going to do 2 slides, and we'll come back to me, and then we're going to go back to Colin and then Dr. Bill.
So just kind of in the complicated nature of this whole process, you know, there's a lot going on, and I thought this was a place that I could kind of step in and help Christopher with the high school analysis, especially because as we consider the de-leveling process that has been a conversation here, has been a focus of the rigor work that's happening at the high school, the high need students here, and the next slide that'll be loaded up. There's some deep analysis that really needs to happen, I think, in a slightly different way than at the other buildings. And so when it comes to this one, I think we really want to make sure we're celebrating the places that we have growth. There's going to be places of work. We've seen that across the district already. There's some areas that we can definitely do better in. But with our high need students, seeing this growth across the board, basically in our ELA and science scores, I think is great to notice and is something that should be celebrated, and is definitely something that we should kind of ask some questions as to how are we accomplishing that, so we can try and continue that growth, continue to support these students as they continue on their educational careers, and really try and figure out what we're doing that we could maybe apply in other areas as well to find that same growth in places that don't necessarily see testing, like our social studies classes and stuff like that. And as we move into the low income on the next slide, this as well, you're gonna see, and I know it's really small on the screen, but when you have it right in front of you, the students meeting and exceeding our average scale scores and our student growth percentiles, we're basically going up across the board with our low income students here. There's one spot where we're a little bit lower than the state in terms of our math, but once again, we've got these questions district-wide about what's going on with our math curriculum. And the math curriculum that we brought in, illustrative math, doesn't cover all of the math classes taught at the high school even, so there are places that we could probably do some work to try and sync up the teacher-driven curriculum with this district-provided curriculum and see how we can better support students all across the board there. But everywhere else, we've got this great growth going on, and once again, I think it's something to be celebrated, something to look into so that we can apply whatever we're doing well everywhere else.
This is the one that I thought was really interesting. Low-income students over time, what you have is in the gray bar, you have not low income, in the green line, I should say, is low income. And you can see with ELA over time, from 2019 to 2024, those two are almost meeting each other, which is great because we're closing an achievement gap there. It does not, as you can see, close. It doesn't really get any closer. It's pretty similar during those 5 years on math. But then in science, there's a dramatic gap in 2019 or 2020, I can't read the year, but by the time we get to 24, it is so close. Granted, the arc of that with the non-low income is a little higher in the center, but the fact that we're figuring out how to support our students to all perform closer to the same level is really important.
Yeah, when we looked at these are some of the slides I was most excited about. Ideally, the far one, the science one, the gray line would start going back up too, and they both be going up in unison. The ELA one's also really interesting. It came down a little, but it's starting to go back up. Yes, sir.
So much like you've heard from the other two buildings, right? We have these demographic groups that aren't necessarily large enough to give us some really significant statistical information, but it is definitely something we need to be paying attention to as we move our DEIB work forward, especially just making sure that we're supporting all students, and that means we have to be aware of where all of our students are, meet them where they're at, so we can help support them in growth in whatever areas they have or whatever areas they need. So I don't know that there's much more to say here that hasn't already been said wonderfully by Cynthia and Jake, and I don't know that I can say anything better than they can. But it's just another common kind of trend across the district. We need to be paying attention to these so we can support all of our students in being academically successful. And so this is the first of two slides that I find really interesting. This came together because I took a note out of Dr. Putnam's page, actually, who has done many years of county-wide comparison data. If you really want to participate in some nerdy data conversations, join Dr. Putnam and I for a meeting once in a while. I can't tell whose passion for it runs deeper, his or mine. And because you're all so enthralled by the hours we could go into, I can just walk you number by number through all of this, right? No, just overall, it is an interesting thing to look at. And so I know in the past couple of years, science data has been what's been presented. So that's what I stuck with this year and tried to bring together just a comparative chart of Berkshire County school districts and their science performance. The bar graph at the bottom is highlighting our exceeding and meeting combined rates. So you can see we're definitely in the upper end of the county. This fluctuates year to year. If we looked at it across the last couple of years, there are times that we've been the top. There are times that we've been just like we are now, kind of right in the top groupings. I think what's important there is we're doing really well compared to our neighbors, and we're continuing to find success. Obviously, there's going to be some adjustment in these numbers, and there's some things to talk about and look at in terms of making bigger improvements in the future. But overall, I think it's something just good to know and have on our radars as we kind of talk about these in district and how other county-wide districts are doing. What I really thought was interesting that I wanted to include for you this year, if you'll jump to the next slide, Peter. DESE lays out a list, and every district in Massachusetts is provided a list by DESE of comparable districts. And they define comparable districts as a district that serves similar grade spans, has similar total enrollment and special populations. And so in a way, comparing us to the other Berkshire County districts is a bit of apples and oranges, where this is clearly apples to apples. And what you'll notice is we are doing very well compared to our comparable districts across the state. We are in the highest groupings there. And Lee is one of our comparable districts, and they've had some kind of success this year. That's great. We should celebrate them as one of our neighbors. And so maybe there's some work to do in cross communication between districts if they're finding a path to success that maybe we could learn from and experience ourselves. Then you look at the rest of them where we're really doing well compared to many of these other districts that have similar populations to us. And so that highlights just how well our science programming is working at NMH right now. You can really see there are some like Avon that we are doing significantly better than, and then there are others that are in that middle pack and not far behind. But it does highlight that whether you look at the county or across the state overall, we're doing very well. And when you look at these numbers in ELA and in math as well, it's a similar kind of result. So I presented the science because that's what's been presented to you over the last couple of years, so it was just on trend. But we can look at it in any of the 3 tested subject areas and find very similar results, which I think highlights the great work that our educators in district are doing.
I wanted to just go back to one slide. I can't remember how, it's ELA over time. Yeah, so what's interesting to me about this is that ELA remains strong, and it's during this time that the de-leveling occurred. So these are the 10th grade ELA scores, and I just thought that was, as Jake McCandless pointed out, it's not everything. MCAS data is not, but it's interesting, and we can learn something from it. So, and then over this same period of time, if you can do math for you, math is de-leveled to some degree because we have students taking algebra, students taking geometry in 9th grade, and then moving on there for the 10th grade test and in their 10th grade, and this is going down. One of the things that could be impacting it is not having had that course. What kind of preparation are we doing in advance of this test, that sort of thing. So, but just interesting things to look at in the scheme of what's going on in our district. AP. Oh, yeah, so APs. Yeah, so here's just a snapshot of total AP students, number of exams, test scores with a 3+, percentage of test scores with a 3+. Obviously, total AP students, high 60s, low 70s throughout. Number of exams, high mark in 22 and really solid at 24. 3+, the highest number across these 5 years. And likewise, that correlates with the percentage of students. 80% of our students in 2024 scored a 3 or higher across the AP test.
That seems pretty extraordinary, is it?
Yes,
Yeah, it is. And what's the reason we do 3, and it varies a little bit by college, but some colleges will give you credit for a 4 or 5. Some colleges will give you credit for a 3, 4, or 5. There's also a really rich body of research that says taking an AP class is actually quite more significant than getting a high score on AP. Just the rigor of it is something that everybody should do at least once. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Please, yeah. and this is just the, some of the same information broken out by test. Biology, average score during this time goes from 3.29 to 3.76, so we're up. Calculus AB, challenging test, goes from a 4, which is fantastic, average, down to a 3.3. Chemistry, also a really challenging test, 3.29 to 3.8, which was up. ELA composition goes up from 3.19 to 3.42. English lit comp goes up. Physics goes down, but just barely, it just goes a hair under 3. Spanish goes down a little bit. It was at an extraordinary number of 4.83. I can't see what the, yeah, so we don't know how many students we're testing that year. And it could be 6, and that can be, you know, one student can impact that greatly. French goes from a 3 to a 4, and US history 3.1 to 3.85. A lot of good to celebrate on the scores of the students on these tests. So.
And one thing that they said over time, nothing be crazy, but I would trade more people taking the test and the average going down, because the total number of people getting 3s, 4s, and 5s would actually go up. So I don't want to chase the average, because that may end up being about gatekeeping or discouraging people from sitting the test.
Are these the only AP courses offered?
We offer 9, yeah.
And 9's a gracious plenty. I mean, some schools or districts offer 12 or 14, but
We have opportunities out there.
yeah, if an individual does more than X, then it could set them up for really being unbalanced or something. I don't know.
So that's pretty rigorous, getting 9 in freshman high school.
Yeah, oh no, high school of our size have 9 APs, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was all for me, I think.
Okay, so this.
Any questions?
Oh, yeah, let's do questions for you, and then I'll just do a quick teaser. Anybody?
I have a question, but I think I'll wait until the end. I think
Okay.
it's a more general question.
Ms. Katie,
Yes, sir. So the last slide, and we'll dig into this some more, and we'll come back, right? Because sort of everybody's at their limit on this. Is a teaser for what happens when you look at a cohort. So what we're looking at now are 5-year history or what has happened this past year. But you all know that when you look at 5 years, the group of kids changes every year. Another way of cutting the data is to look at what happened to a group of kids from 3rd to 8th grade, the same group of kids, like one class, or from 3rd through 10th grade. So that's another interesting thing to look at, because then you could really see the value add in each year. So we'll come back at a future meeting, and we won't do it for multiple classes because it'll make us all nuts. But we'll do it for 1 or 2 classes to show it. And one of the classes might be this year's seniors, not coincidentally, that they're also the group that was the first year in the de-leveling thing, right? So we'll look at like where they were starting in 3rd grade all the way through, knowing that we get some number of kids from Farmington River in 7th grade and some number of kids through school choice and tuition agreements with Richmond in 9th grade. So it's not a perfectly stable cohort, but it's worth looking at as a cohort. So I think that's our last slide.
Just to provide the quick color context.
Yeah.
We chose a plus or minus minimum of 5. So if it's a blue number, it is at least 5 percentiles higher than the state. Red represents at least 5 lower than the state of the So you understand the numbers are color coded.
She could actually read all of them.
Well, when you have the file, you'll be able to.
I have a question, I know you kind of touched on the various demographics, is gender one of the graphics that's tracked through this process?
We could, yeah. And you and I've talked about that a lot, right? So like,
Yeah.
girls are outperforming boys quite dramatically, right? And that's something we can share and bring back to you.
Yeah.
Too.
Other questions, Corey?
So the first one was a general question just about, I read an article that had said some states have actually changed and lowered the cutoffs for some of the different kind of met, exceeded, et cetera, to kind of make their data look better at the state level. Is Massachusetts part of that, or no, did they?
No, I mean, it's interesting. Massachusetts is pretty rigorous, but whenever the middle school or elementary school principals present, feel a little bad for them because it's pretty well known that the high school assessments are easier than the middle and elementary schools. And I'm sorry about that. But no, like.
Don't grade on your break.
The accomplishments at the high school are quite significant, but if it's in the bigger system's interest for those metrics to be easier, because if they were really hard, then people wouldn't graduate, right? And then the whole thing breaks down. So.
That leads to my next question.
Yeah.
Which will probably gain in importance in the next few weeks, but I guess we have a lot of educators in the room that have had exposure and experience with the 10th grade MCAS, and I would love to hear anyone's reflections on whether or not that's an appropriate test for graduation requirement.
I mean, one thing that I'll say is it's like a big debate, right? And there are people on either side of the debate, and unions are on one side, and the governor and some other people on other sides. The question is worded in a very particular way, right? You could get like the League of Women Voters thing and read it, but it's not about eliminating testing, it's whether the testing should be a requirement to graduate.
That's why I asked the question.
Right, and the actual percentage of kids that are impacted, right, and this has been widely reported, it's like 1%, right? So if you take the test and you don't, or one of the tests and you don't pass it, you can take it again a couple other times. You can also meet it another way through like a local based determination. So when all is said and done, the people that are earning a certificate of attendance or participation, I forget exactly what it's called, are 1%. Now, if you're that kid in the 1%, or you're the parent or family of the kid in the 1%, it's a really, really big deal. But that context isn't well understood, and people on both sides of the argument, I don't think are speaking honestly. They're arguing a lot.
Having worked in Massachusetts, Maryland, and Vermont, Vermont not having a standardized test that is required passing for graduation, what I saw was just no seriousness around it at all, you know, that it became a meaningless measure. You know, nobody took the test seriously. Too many kids and families really believe that they could opt out. No, you can't, you know, and so then ultimately, you know, small percentages, not 20%, but the percentages that, you know, you're supposed to have a 95% participation rate, and you'd be struggling to get that because the kids wouldn't show up, you know, or whatever. So in Maryland, it was like it is in Massachusetts, and, you know, for what it's worth, I believe that having some standards for graduation requirements are important. So.
Great.
Thank you. And where I hope we get in all of this is that, and Bill's the most eloquent of all of us, that this isn't all consuming and a focus of resources and time, but it's a little hurdle along the way. And we're doing work that's significant and meaningful and rigorous and transcends this. And this is a little sort of bump along the road. And in some places, we're starting to show that. In other places, we got a way to go.
Can I just ask for something? I appreciate the grass with all like Nantucket and Avon or whatever, but I take a lot more of Berkshire County. I would like a graph, like similar to what you showed with the science just the past year, but the last 3 years for the Berkshire County schools of the last year, of all three of them for the high school. So 24, 23, 22, 21. Comparative of all the districts in the county, and the scores kind of going across.
Yeah, so, and do you want to do it in all grades or?
No, just high school.
Yeah, so, ninth and tenth for science, which you already have, and tenth for English and math. Yeah,
And then that's the one where we made the dramatic shifts, right?
Yeah,
I mean, last year was the first year for proficiency base for the middle school.
Right.
So we'll give them another year or two to judge that. But I think for the high school 3 year. See how things are trending over a 3 year period.
Yeah, that'd be
Good
good.
idea.
We're happy to do that. We'll put that together. We'll also do the cut by genders.
Anyone else? I'd just like to say that there is some background to even this test that many people don't understand, that this was never intended, this test, to be a rank of schools in the state when it started, which was in 1993. And I was part of the department that really fought it, but we lost. We didn't really lose. No, actually, people from the Division of Education admitted that we had a good school district. But as one administrator said to my department head, I guess we're gonna have to throw the baby out with the bathwater because there are other districts that aren't doing this. The history of this was never to rank schools like we are doing now. It was to just try to see the state. How can we narrow the gap between low income and special needs with the rest? And if you look at this result, and I'm glad that we're gonna get some on gender and what Jason has asked for. When you look at it statewide though, that gap has not changed since 1993. And we're spending, according to the most recent budget, about $34 million on testing. And Einstein said his famous quote, what's insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over and over. And we're doing that. It's not doing what the purpose of it was. Now in our district, and I will praise our district, and when I was gonna run for this position in whenever it was, 2014, I interviewed Peter, I interviewed all the principals, and one of the things that came out is we are doing what the state wants us to do. And as the words of a former Ludlow superintendent, we're keeping them at hand's length. We're doing what they want us to do, and with the growth potentials that we've seen, that's going to be the case. But we are concentrating on doing what we do best. And what we do best in this district is just not teach to the test. And I'm pleased that every grade level, I don't hear that. I don't hear, oh, we're teaching for the test. Other districts, you'll hear that. So
it's interesting, Bill. Do you remember you came before the school committee with your colleagues the late 1990s when the test was going to start to count, not practice, and said, we have two problems. We want you not to participate. And we tried that. That didn't work because the state didn't find it humorous.
No, the principal almost lost his life.
Yeah, we voted not to participate and had to take it back 2 weeks later because he really wanted to still be a principal. But number two was, don't be a district that teaches to the test. Don't make people remember stupid dates and not be able to write a comprehensive essay. And I think we've done pretty good with that.
We've done what I had hoped in doing. We're keeping the state at arm's length. We're not bowing to the state, but we're also saying, okay, as Peter said, this is a hurdle that you have to jump over. It's just one bump in the road. I used to, as a teacher, we proctored MCAS, and I remember telling the kids that no one's going to ask you as a senior what your score was on MCAS or in a job interview. Oh, what did you get on MCAS? They're not going to do that. It's something that, sophomores have to do. The other thing I was going to say is that depends on the quality of the class. Some days, back in the days when I was teaching, we had brilliant classes that aced the SAT. I remember that bunch of data. That I went to a couple of school committee meetings in which basically the slides were on SATs. And one year, the SAT scores were off the chart. We averaged, I can't remember that senior class, I think the average score was like a 1400.
Yeah.
That is insane. But when you looked at who was in the class, we had 2 valedictorians whose grade average when a graduate was over 100.2. They tied. There became a big issue about that. But it was an incredible class. Then the next year, oh my God, the average SAT score went down to like, I think 1,200. And boy, there were members in the school, oh my God, what happened? But when you look at the nucleus of the class, who was making up the class? And I think you'll see it in here, because right now you have a very powerful senior class that no matter what the curriculum is, they're gonna do well. I don't know what the cohort is coming up, so.
Thanks, everybody, for your patience on this. It's hard and it's a lot to digest. I'm gonna make one other offer, and none of you will take me up on it, but if anybody wants to go really and do a deep dive, Colin, I, or Rob will sit with you in front of a monitor and you can sort of query things and we'll click on things. We won't do like individual student level data because that would be inappropriate, but we will do groups. So if you've got some theory about something and you want to test it, we're happy to take the time to do it. No, not tonight. No, certainly not. So moving along in a couple potentially quick things. We have a second, I think that's it for me.
It is.
Right, we have a second reading of 2 policies.
So either Corey or Robert. Peter, Corey, do you want to do it? or
Yeah, I mean, it's really straightforward. It's exactly what we read last time. The one thing, I think there was a space or a dash that was corrected. Catherine's email is spelled correctly now. On the first one on ACA, those links are still just going to a landing page, but maybe that just can't change. And I think the ACGA had no changes needed. So it's really just if anyone has any other questions.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to ordain.
Second.
So a motion by Rich, a second by Bill Field. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstention? Unanimous. Buildings and grounds, someone to my left, I'm not sure who. Superintendent's evaluation.
We're still meeting.
There we are. Yes, we're not going to take that up tonight, because they are still meeting. They're really interesting questions. Finance subcommittee, Rich.
Yeah, we did meet. We heard from the Yuli on the IT, prospective IT budget, and Steve on the facilities. The IT was very positive. We seem to be on track with all the plans that were laid out like 3 years ago, and financially that should not be a big impact for the next fiscal year. Steve went through a number of issues that, he's been warning us of for years, not warning, but anticipating years to come with the 2 newer buildings, about mechanical and other issues, which he seems to be on top of. But, we're gonna start seeing some increased capital costs of those buildings, maybe as soon as the next budget for some system type things, including some major electric work.
Anything else? Any questions? Negotiations for off-season personnel.
The big one is, and Cynthia mentioned it, welcoming Jacob May as the administrative assistant in Muddy Brook. And we're really excited about him. Rest are mostly stipends.
Peter, can we add the school committee meeting report to current vacancy?
Yes, that is a good one.
Excellent.
And it might be Jacob May, so I'm gonna call him tomorrow.
School building, Mass School Building Authority update, Jason or Peter?
Just a quick thing, and it seems like it was years ago, but this morning, Jason, Donna Danisco and I did like a half-hour interview conversation on WSBS talking about the high school project, and two of the people in this office happened to listen to us and thought we were very well spoken, and it's sort of insightful, but we convinced them well enough, and they're excited about it, so. I think it went well. Jesse was really nice, and we're gonna go back and do it again.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it went well. And again, before, after we get the numbers in this November, we're gonna go back again for another session. So.
And then just big things, there's some people watching online, big meeting coming up on October 1st, 6 o'clock in this room. And then another one later in November. It's all on the monumentbuildingproject.org website. And we hope people will join with us. And then we had a nice chat with the Department of Transportation around potential ideas for egress and I don't know what the other side of it is, whatever, for the entrance and exit to the high school. So we're gonna continue those conversations.
And just next Tuesday, October 1st, at 6 o'clock, it's gonna be in person, but it's also gonna be Zoom or online as well. So for those who can't join, you'll have both options.
Just so school committee knows, there'll be no executive session tonight. Public comment? Seeing no hands, anyone else? By unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.